Welcome to this week's episode of Pondering Play and Therapy with me, Philippa. And this week, my guest is Kim Golding, CBE. And Kim is a clinical psychologist. She's also an author and a DDP, which is Dyadic Development Psychotherapy, consultant and trainer with over 30 years' experience of working in this field. Kim works to improve the lives of children affected by early relational trauma. So thanks so much, Kim, for coming on to our podcast.
You're welcome.
So 30 years is a long time to be doing this kind of work.
Yeah, I'm feeling old.
You don't look it, you look awesome. I suppose lots of people have different stories about how they got into working with families and children. Is it something that you fell into, or was it a career path that kind of when you were a teenager you thought psychology is where I'm going to go?
Oh, I had a chemistry teacher who told me, whatever you do, don't go into psychology.
Oh.
A career in it. I was very much on a science route. My father wanted me to be a dentist. So I was doing science A levels, which was a huge mistake. I'm much better at the social sciences than the whatever you call them sciences. No, it was basically mucking up my A levels that got me into clinical psychology eventually. So because I didn't do as well as I was expected to do in my A levels, I ended up in the clearinghouse. Still looking at science. So I was looking at physiology and zoology, and I got offered a place to clearing at Cardiff University. But at Cardiff, you do your main subjects and two others equally for the first year. So I had to choose another one. I thought, I was always quite interested in psychology. I'll put that down. And that's as accidental as it was. Fell in love with psychology, fell in love with clinical psychology, and the rest, they say, is history. So I say to people, don't worry about mucking up A levels or exams or qualifications, because you never know where it might lead.
I think in this profession, lots of people find the way into it, don't they? Rather than think, actually, this is the career path I'm gonna go down. You find
who in their teens really knows what they want to do with their lives. So yeah.
Absolutely. And then did you go into the NHS? Or did you always work with children and families, or did you work with adults?
Yeah, I went into clinical training wanting to work with children. That was always an ambition of mine. So yeah, did clinical training and went into the NHS. That was the route. There wasn't so much moving straight into private practice in those days. So I did 35 years in the NHS, which, I think accords with my values.
Yeah. And then, and I guess when you're in there, because over the 30 years, the understanding of attachment and neurodiversity and how the brain works and the nervous system works, it's changed massively, hasn't it?
When I first went into the field, we're only just beginning to realise that children were sexually abused.
Oh, God.
That was not now. Freud had a lot to do with it. But that was just not a thing. And then in the late 70s, that was becoming understood, that actually children are sexually abused within their families. So that's how much change has happened over these years, that the whole field was poorly understood. When I started work, so post-qualification, I actually started working on the other side of the divide, so working with families who were struggling to parent their children. So parenting has always been an interest of mine, in helping parents to parent their children according to the children's needs. And I was working with parents who, for whatever reason, were struggling to parent, including what was in those days called Munchausen by proxy. So did quite a bit of work with those parents. And it was only moving to Worcestershire, which was following my husband because of he was made redundant and got a job here. Things, happen, don't they? That I got the job in Worcestershire, which was my first dipping my toe in the water of looked after children, as they were called in those days. And I was very lucky to be in a position of we were funded as a multi-agency team to develop a team to support foster carers initially, adopters as well later on, and children's homes. And that's where all this journey, this DDP journey began. It began in, I really feel for psychologists today, because I don't think they get those creative opportunities that I was so privileged to have, that we were literally given a blank page and some money and obviously some guidelines about what they wanted. It was definitely a support project. They wanted the carers supported. And then I had to figure out how to do that.
Yeah.
And I didn't know. I came from a cognitive behavioural background. I tell this story in my training. I remember going out to one of the early visits to a foster carer who was grandmother and had been fostering for years and years. Many children passed through a door, was fostering a very complex young person with a complex history. And I started talking behavioural ideas with her, and she was just so kind to me because it was clear that what I was suggesting, but she knew far more about parenting these children than I did.
Yeah.
And that was a kind of, okay, what am I going to do here? And luckily, that's when I met Dan Hughes.
Yeah.
That was, that gave me the, okay, this is the way forward. Now I have a model, I can train in that model, and I've got something to bring to these families, because up until then, I didn't really have much to offer them.
And I think that's something that I've experienced, is that foster carers, parents, they are really kind and generous, aren't they, when you were saying, because when I started out on my journey with DDP and therapy and those sorts of things, I would say to foster carers, will you just have a go? And they're like, "Oh, yeah, okay, we'll have a go." And they just will buy into, and that, I think, as a practitioner, as somebody who's going in and working with families, it's so, I don't know, such an honor, I think, and with birth families as well, is that they are kind when we are maybe not always knowing or getting it quite right,
Yeah.
especially in those. Come.
Yeah, I think the biggest learning of my career really has been working collaboratively with your clients, whoever those clients are, that just to drop the expert position.
Yeah.
You own your expertise, you bring your expertise to the table. You're working with someone, you're figuring it out together, whether
Yeah.
it's adult therapy, whether it's a child, working with therapy with a child, whether it's parenting support and guidance. To do the work collaboratively, we're in this together, is the way to do it. And
Yeah.
I know my work is richer for that collaborative approach. The writing I do, the group programs that I've done have all been informed by collaborative working with the parents, whoever those parents are, foster carers, adopters, and birth families, kinship parents, residential caregivers. All of those parent figures have contributed to my books, really, because
Yeah.
that's how I've learned.
Yeah.
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 Absolutely. And I think holding on to that is really important, isn't it? So you met Dan Hughes. My training was with Dan Hughes, so I was
Mhm.
quite, and that's how actually I didn't go further down the DDP route. I went into therapy, but it was
Yeah.
Dan Hughes that told me. I'd never heard of therapy. It was him
Right.
that and told me about it, but you were way before it really took off. DDP was a slow burn, wasn't it, in the UK? Real, I imagine everywhere, but
Well,
certainly
not slow. It went a bit faster than we could keep up with when we
oh,
tried to
right, okay.
develop services around it. But yeah, I met Dan in, must have been 1999, 2000. So very early on when he was coming over to England and the UK. He went to Scotland as well. And he's starting to work with Family Futures and with Edwina Grant in Scotland, bringing DDP ideas in. So I went to one of those early, an introductory day, first of all, which just blew me away. And I thought, this is what I want. This is what we need in our service. So then I signed up for level 1.
Yeah.
A year later did level 2, and then went to Maine to do an extra level 2 or level 3, whatever it was called in those days, but just to do it again. So I did 3 sort of 4-day trainings, and obviously got to know Dan during that time. showed in some of the things I was working on, including the Nurturing Attachments program, because I was working on that at the time. And he's always been really generous about people taking his work as a platform to develop on. So that's how I got to know him, really. How we got there to where we are now, I'm not quite sure.
Can I just ask you, in the early days, did you find much resistance? Because I've interviewed different people who've got the level of experience that you have, who started in the 70s and 80s and early 90s, where the attachment and the brain stuff, there was a bit of resistance to actually, no, this isn't going on. I spoke to Hillary Kennedy, who does the VIG stuff, and she was saying, people were actually saying, don't say that because you're bringing us into disrepute because it's not the way it is.
The biggest resistance was to the attachment piece.
Yeah.
And that was because there was a huge scandal around the use of attachment theory in practice at the time that Dan was developing DDP. And that was coming out of the holding therapy movement.
Yeah.
And it was very worrying. And when I went to the introductory day with Dan, that was in my mind. Is this something we need to steer clear of?
Yeah.
Because children had died in America through attachment interventions. There was some really dodgy stuff happening at the time. And of course, we didn't want to be perpetuating that. And Dan did get coloured by that, not because he was doing anything coercive.
Yeah.
But because it was attachment therapy, people started to think, oh, that's more of this dangerous stuff.
Yeah.
And we did have, not so much recently, but we've had articles written putting down DDP as a dangerous attachment therapy.
Gosh.
That we
Even now?
Not for a few years now, but it's
Okay.
not that long ago that there was a social
Wow.
worker in America. I won't mention her name, but a social worker in America who was writing very damning articles about attachment therapists and included DDP within that.
Right.
We didn't get involved in those discussions and arguments. What we did is we put our own house in order. Let's make DDP as robust an intervention as we can, as quality-driven as we can, as research-driven as we can. Now, getting the research base is a very long process. We are still waiting for the results of our first RCT trial, which has cost millions. You know, it's not an easy place, but we've supported that with lots of smaller scale studies and audits and evaluations of services and those sorts of things. So we're gradually building up a body of knowledge that says DDP is doing something useful and helpful.
And I'm guessing it's much harder to quantify the change in attachment, isn't it? If you're doing a CBT piece of work and you're working on a phobia, there's a beginning, a middle, and an end, isn't there? There's an outcome. If you're working with a young person who's experienced trauma or early adversity, it's very difficult to measure that sense of felt safety that they've got in a relationship, because actually the behaviors may get worse.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And behavior will remain challenging, especially when you move into the teens. A lot of these young people really struggle at the teen years for all sorts of reasons, and parents are hanging on by their fingertips. So, you can do an intervention pre-12 and then you look at them as a teen, you say, has that helped? Yeah. Hopefully it's helped carers hang on. Bringing the children through to the end. I always say what foster carers and adopters and birth parents who have tried working with children who've got traumas are doing is they're planting seeds, but they really rarely come to fruition until adulthood. You don't know what's going to flourish and what isn't. I've had a really great Christmas this year in that I've had, I think, 3 contacts from 3 different parents about their grown-up children.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Just wanted you to know they're doing well for whatever reason. So if you live long enough, you can see that you've really helped, but you don't necessarily see that at the time. Because you're working with a lot of stress, a lot of distress in the children and in the parents. And I use parents to mean all in
Yeah.
whatever way they're caring for the child. I'll just use that as the general term. Lots of block care, as Dan and John
Yeah.
talk about it. That because parenting these children who fear relationships is really hard. And
Yeah.
these children will not trust easily. Why should they? And it's a long journey to build that trust. You can't do this with 12 sessions of CBT. And I'm not knocking CBT, and trauma-focused CBT definitely has its place and can be a really useful intervention, along with a lot of other
Yeah.
things.
Yeah.
And I think DDP brings a very holistic approach to supporting the families. It's not just targeted at therapy with children. That is an important part of it. That's where Dan started in developing DDP. He started developing a therapy for the children, which involved the parents, because what's broken in a relationship needs to heal in a relationship.
Yeah.
That took us into, and this is the practice model that we've developed over time, which I could send you a diagram of. That moved into, so how do we support the parents in order to do the therapy work? That
Yeah.
then took us into, and this is where a lot of my work was, well, how do we help the parents be DDP informed parents? How do
Yeah.
they bring the principles in the work? And what support do they need, importantly, to do that? Because it's not a quick fix. It's a long, hard process, and you have to cope with a lot of rejection and hurt along the way, because these children are not going to readily trust that parents are safe people. And that's their life experience. Yeah, we honour
Yeah.
that. We privilege that. We get that these children are going to come with a lot of adults are mean, parents are dangerous, I'm a bad kid. And it's slowly those narratives change. So we have to work alongside the parents. This is where collaborative working is so important, where
Yeah.
we're in their lives. I mean, they joke about having a bedroom in the house for me. we're not moving into their families, but we are in their lives, and we need to be in their lives for longer term.
Yeah.
Isn't always understood.
No, and I suppose that was just before we get into the model, that thing around as a therapist being there for the longer term, because sometimes in my work I will get pushback from maybe other therapists who don't do this work. If you've been doing it for 3 years and it still hasn't changed, then maybe you're the wrong.
Yeah,
They
exactly.
need something different,
Mm.
rather than thinking actually this is about consistently showing up and having those breaks where they're saying, I don't want to see you anymore, I hate you. And us still saying, actually, we're still here for you and you can come
Mm.
back when you want to. And then they come back. And that 3-year process is actually just that consistent, predictable stuff. That's not just for the child, it's also for the parent, isn't it? That actually they've
Absolutely.
got somebody alongside them who can
Mm.
empathize and say, I know this is really hard for you right now. And
Mm.
I'm sorry I can't do anything, but I can hear you. So it is a much longer term position
Definitely.
of a therapist than traditional therapeutic
Yeah, yeah.
models.
Because it's more than a therapy.
Yeah,
It's so much more than that.
yeah,
You are working with the environments that these children are growing up in to try and
yeah,
help those environments become supportive enough to help them over time heal.
yeah,
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 that means working with the parent environment. That means working with the school environment. It means working with social services and the social work service system around these children and the
yeah,
health system around these children. We need to we can't fix the child. That's just a
yeah, yeah,
myth. The child isn't broken. They're just struggling with life experience. And
yeah,
they're doing the best they can with as much resilience, and they have amazing resilience in what they bring. So if they're not broken, we're not fixing them.
no,
But what
yeah,
we're doing is we're trying to provide them healthy environments to grow up in, where their narratives about self and others can slowly change.
yeah,
And
yeah,
that's the healing. Is when you can finally say, okay, not all adults are mean, and maybe I'm not a bad kid.
yeah,
Yeah. And that's the journey these children are going on. And that's not going to be a quick one, because their early life experience has taught them that they are a bad kid, and
Absolutely.
adults are mean.
Yeah.
Yeah, and again, I'm not blaming any parents who are, parent to the best they can. Dan always talks about hold these three assumptions. They're good people doing the best they can, and they want to love
Yeah.
their child. And I hold that very dear for the poor birth families who lose their children because for
Yeah.
whatever reason, they're not able to parent them well. And, and that's a great sadness. Yeah, I grew up with a
Yeah.
mother who was depressed most of my life. I know that parents will sometimes not give you what you need,
Yeah.
but they dearly want to.
Yeah.
And how we step in and support them, I think, needs looking at.
Absolutely. And often the system then can exacerbate it, can't they? So we then don't have, you know, foster placements, and so children can be moved, they can be moved schools, and so that initial trauma actually can
It's
be
compounded.
exacerbated by a system, and then they can have had 4 or 5 people who are going to be their parents by the time they get to their settled placement, whether that be adoption, fostering, or returning home. Sometimes
Yeah,
we
absolutely.
work with families where children are coming home after they've had 5 or 6 foster placements, and we're expecting parents to parent children who are very different than when they left because the system has intervened in some way.
Yeah.
And that again is not about blame, it's just
It,
about
it
a
isn't just,
broken system,
it's
really.
really challenging how to support these family and these children. It's a really challenging task, and there isn't enough money. The shit comes down to that, because
Yeah,
what we ought to be doing is putting a lot more trauma work into the parents.
absolutely.
We
Yeah,
go in, services tend to go in at the behavioural point. This is how you parent your child.
yeah,
That misses so much that these parents need. But that would make services really expensive, wouldn't it? It came
yeah,
down to, do we have the
absolutely.
money to actually give these families what they need, what they deserve? Probably not. That's sort of,
Yeah.
I don't want to verge into politics, but it's,
Yes. You
it's
could go
really,
all down the ASF, but
oh
we'll
yeah, we'll
we'll
weave around
side
that. Yeah,
that one, Kim,
yeah,
shall we? So
that's,
I just wanted to ask, I work at Gateway Psychology Services, and we do lots of training with parents, and we often use your house model, which
yeah.
is just amazing, and PACE, which is playfulness, acceptance, curiosity, and empathy. And those two together, I think, are for parents are an easy takeaway. Could you just explain a little bit about those? Did you develop them, and how and
Well, I
why?
can't take
And
the credit for pace. That very much comes from Dan, much as I'd love to. And we
yeah.
did write Creating Loving Attachments together, which is the book about pace. Yeah,
Yes, yes, definitely.
yeah,
And
but
I'll put a link to that book in our in
yeah,
the write
yeah.
up for this. Yeah.
So Dan Dan came up with this acronym when his history is he was working a service for children who had been abused. This would be in the 70s. And he was finding, and that took him into working with foster adoptive parents, because
Yeah.
a lot of these children were being parented in foster and adoptive homes. And he was finding all his ways of working were not helping. All the things that he'd been trained to do and the therapies he was providing were just not making a difference to these children. And he tells a story in his training, which I'm sure he won't mind me repeating, of the child one day said, "I know how you can help me." And he said, "Yeah, tell me." He said, "Well, you just help me move every 3 months and then I'll be fine." And it was just like, oh my goodness, that's how this young person feels. Yeah,
Yeah.
they do not believe in permanence. They do not believe that this family can hang on in there with them.
Yeah.
And if they move every 3 months and they can keep starting again, you get that honeymoon period where it all feels okay. And he thought, we need to do something to help these children. And that was the start. And then he had to think, but what? And of course, he looked at attachment theory. It was an obvious one to look at. Later on, bringing in intersubjectivity when he met Cole Winterathan and was understanding more about that model. And he looked at, what did I do with my children? He
Mm.
has 3 daughters. What works with them? And that's where pace came from, because we are naturally paceful with our very young children. We are playful. We accept whatever they bring. We may feel frustrated because you're
Yeah.
a parent, but we accept that they're hungry, they're upset, they're tired, they're grumpy, whatever. We accept it. we're curious about it, because that's how we solve the problems with infants who are non-verbal, isn't it? We have to be curious about what's going on for you that I can do to help you. And we have empathy for them. And that's it. It's not that we lose that when the children grow older, but we bring in the discipline, and we bring in the expectations of what they should be doing in school, in education, with their peer group. And it all gets lost a little bit in the huge task of parenting growing children, where we have expectations of them. And we do have to discipline them, because that keeps children alive. We have to come in with that. And when you start bringing that alongside the playfulness, acceptance, curious, empathic parenting, it's much more challenging. Yeah. So that was the move. That was what DDP is all about, is how do we hold this paceful attitude alongside all these other parenting tasks as the children grow. So that was the parenting side. And obviously in the therapy side is, how do we give these children this experience of being in a relationship which is paceful for them, which is intersubjective in a positive way. And
that can be really hard, can't it, for children to have that empathy reflected back to them, that don't do that, don't say that, don't, because it connects with something that is odd and different for them, isn't it? And it can be a little, and often parents will say they don't like that.
Yeah. Children have told me it's weird.
Yeah.
You're a witch, you're psychic. How do you know what's in my head? Yeah. But more importantly, that they're also telling me, I don't want to feel vulnerable.
Yeah.
This is hard. I don't want to cry, and you're making me cry.
Yeah.
Of course, you have to adapt your empathy to what they can tolerate, and hopefully gradually increase that range of tolerance.
Yeah.
So I call it muting empathy.
Yeah.
You have to mute your empathy for some children.
Yeah.
So that's one issue with empathy, is what can the child tolerate, and can we work within their window of tolerance for it, and can we gradually broaden that window?
Yeah.
But
Can you do empathy with positive feelings though?
Of course, absolutely.
Yeah, and just think that's easier than
it might be easier, but it still brings emotion up, which in the past has felt dangerous.
Yes.
So these children maybe don't want to feel that, or they feel it in the moment and then they want to reclaim it back.
Yeah.
So they can enjoy moments of playfulness. And we can dip in and out of playfulness, but then they may have to reassert their control. Yeah, because it feels a bit scary. But the other big thing with empathy is it has to be authentic. You can't fake it till you make it. So that relies on mentalization, that the parents can really understand what's going on within their child, underneath the behavior, to really have acceptance for that. What you feel is neither right nor wrong, it just is. And when you get that, you can start to feel empathy for the child quite naturally.
Yeah.
A child who's angry and shouting hatred at you and threatening you with, I'm going to stab you with a knife, or it's very hard. You can't have empathy for a child in that state. You just can't. It just triggers, the brain people will tell you it triggers different parts of the brain,
Absolutely.
But what you can do is you can hold on to your curiosity. What's going on? What has created this anger for my child? What's underneath that? And when we go underneath it, and that's the mentalization process, we can start to make sense of the hurt, the worry, the fear, the sadness that's underneath. And when we start to understand that you can empathize with.
Yeah.
So then your empathy comes through as you connect with the child around that internal experience. Wow, you must be really scared right now if you're feeling that way. I get that. I get you're scared because I was out late last night and I didn't come back when I promised. Wow, that must have been so scary for you. I hadn't quite understood how you would have been frightened that we weren't coming back. Okay, now I really understand that you're really angry with me right now. Yeah, and I bet you do feel like stabbing me with a knife. Yeah, I know you won't, because you're a good kid, but I can understand that you feel that way. Yeah, and I'll do my best to support you in how you show me those feelings. Because some of the ways you're showing me these feelings, I can't allow. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's to be able to do that, to be able to do the connection with the discipline. Yeah. It's huge. It's huge.
Yeah.
I know my kids, half of my kids are grown up. When they trigger me, I just move to defensive so fast.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
really hard, and I've hats off to the carers who do this. That it's really hard to stay open and engaged and curious when you're under attack.
Mm.
And that's what we're asking these carers to do. To
Yeah.
stay open and engaged and curious what is going on underneath. And when we
Yeah.
can get to that, it just opens up a whole different dimension to the relationship.
Yeah. Yeah. And this isn't about, because often people say, we're just letting them get away with it. But it's not that, is it? There's still the discipline, there's still the boundaries, there's still actually, it's not okay that you hit your sister. What is okay is the feeling you had at that moment in
Exactly.
time. So I can connect with that feeling and say, I can see that you were really frustrated there or cross or whatever it is. But that's not the way to show me, really.
And I will guarantee that all of those children know it's not okay.
Absolutely.
And they
Yeah.
know they're a bad kid because they're doing that. So we're not letting them get away with anything.
Yeah.
Yeah, they are in shame because they know they're behaving in ways that are unacceptable and disappoint the people that they don't want to
Yeah.
disappoint.
Yeah.
Yeah. The idea that you're letting them get away with something is a little bit of a nonsense. You're leaving them in shame.
Yeah.
When you move straight into discipline, and especially if that discipline is punitive, all you're doing is compounding the shame they're feeling because you're just reinforcing the idea that they already know I'm a bad kid.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so it makes no sense in
No.
terms of helping children develop into being pro-social citizens in the world. It makes no sense to not address that layer underneath.
Yeah.
And when we
Yeah.
address the layer underneath, the child softens. And then they take the discipline. They join us in. I talk about collaborative consequences rather than coercive consequences. Traditional parenting is very coercive. You threaten me with a knife, therefore this is going to be the consequence. It's not acceptable, this is going to be the consequence. So it's a coercive one implemented by the parents for the best of motivations.
Yeah.
But that's what happens. Where if you say, I really don't like you threatening me with a knife, but I get it. I get that you were feeling really angry with me right then. And I think underneath that anger, you were also really scared. Maybe you were scared that I wasn't going to come back. Wow, those are big feelings to be managing. I get why you were so angry. What are we going to do, though, about the knife? Because it's not acceptable to threaten anybody with a knife. And the child then, who's feeling understood, is much more likely to say, I know. Okay, what are we going to do about it? Let's figure that out together. And the child will often come up with, well, I could do this. It might be, can you hide the knives away, Mum? Because I'm not sure I can trust myself at the moment.
Yeah.
Yeah? It might be, can I do some chores for you? Just say sorry, because the child will come up with their own ideas, which we can join them with to make them, because often they come up with wild ideas as well. A young child might say, can I give you all my Pokemon cards? Oh, maybe we don't need to go that far, but what about if you do this? So we figure it out together. And that's what I mean by collaborative consequences.
Yeah.
That's the best discipline.
Yeah.
It's the child's figuring it out with support from the parent.
Yeah.
How do I deal with these strong emotions that I'm not managing very well at the moment?
Yeah.
And they do it because they feel understood. Yeah.
And those examples that you gave are also in relationship, aren't they? They're not done to the child's not sent away, or the young person. It's together we will put the knives away. Together, I'm going to do something kind for you because I've understood that maybe that made you sad. And so it's a relational connection, which is that rupture and repair, isn't it? Which is what we want, is that actually we all break relationships either on a micro level or on a big level, and we say sorry and we repair it, don't we, in a relationship? And I guess that's what you're teaching when you're thinking those things through.
Yeah, the DDP model is all about relationships and connection. It's relationship is right at the heart of it. And it's making sense of why children fear relationship. And it's finding ways to help these children discover safe relationships. That's what DDP is all about.
Yeah. And you can do DDP with, you've talked about in therapy, and also with parents, helping them to build those skills. And then as practitioners, for us to work with parents. So it's a multi-layered thing, isn't it? That everybody can kind of work in the same way, using the same phrases, the same wonderings or curiosity, which I guess for the child also then feels safe, whether they're at school, whether they're at home, whether they're in therapy, whether they're with grandparents. The conversations can easily be the same feeling.
Yes. That's what we would love for children. It's not what always
Yes,
easy
I
to obtain.
understand. Yeah.
But yeah, that's what we want. We want these children to, hey, can the world have a good dose of this? We all grew up in these environments.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Pace, it's such a simple idea, but it's actually so powerful. Yeah. I should give a nod to people who are in non-English speaking countries, though, that it is problematic in that it is in English language. We need to find a word for pace that doesn't necessarily rely on English language. So
Yes.
just,
Yeah.
that's just something to be thoughtful about as we think about bringing pace around the world.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it's an acronym that just captures something so fundamental to what a relationship is all about.
Yeah. And I think it's, sorry, go on.
No, go.
I was going to say, I think it's something that you then becomes instinctive. I just think I was learning this when, as my child was growing up, so often practice lots of the curious and wonderings, and as they reach teenage years, they would say, "Mum, don't do that stuff." But then I'd hear them on their headphones to their friends saying, "I'm just wondering," and I'd be like, "Yes." So even though like they were resistant, it was still going in, and even now they're in their early 20s, and I can hear in their conversations at times these paceful words and the way that they are reflective without ever thinking, because if they thought that they were doing what, that therapy stuff that you do with them other kids, they'd be mortified.
Especially as teenagers, you have to rebel against what your parents do. That's on the
Absolutely.
job description of a teenager. So, that's why the teens are such challenging times, particularly with traumatized teens.
Yeah.
Yeah, it does. It still soaks in. Yeah.
Yeah. And it just becomes a way of life, doesn't it? A word, but I think it's hard to get to that point. It's a very different way of parenting, isn't it? And you have to be very mindful. I know sometimes I work with foster carers or adopters, and they'll say, I just think, what would Philippa say? And they almost have to be very conscious in the beginning, but very quickly you can hear it again with them starting to come through once, but you have to be very, mindful, I think, at the beginning.
Yes, and I think we have to acknowledge that you can't do that all the time.
Absolutely.
We do lose it. We do move back into defensive ways of responding. That's being human. Sorry, the phone's ringing. Can you hear it? No. Sorry, just recap of what we're thinking. I think it's really important, especially for parents listening, to know that this is not easy.
No.
And to know that even those of us who've been practicing pace professionally for years and years are not always paceful with our children it's very normal and natural to move into defensive ways of responding.
Yeah.
So you don't need to beat yourself up about that. Yeah. I'm thinking about when my daughter was 15, 16, and it's a horrible age. It's a really challenging age as a parent, or it was for me anyway. And I was at the time understanding and learning about PACE and DDP, and obviously bringing it into my parenting. And I was rubbish at it because I would move to defensive so fast because what she was doing, it's not, she didn't do it deliberately, but what she was doing was triggering me with bits of my attachment history, which I can make sense of. And I was getting cross with her. And even when I would have days where I managed to hold on to pace and it would be beautiful. We'd have a really good connection and she would calm from her dysregulated state. She's autistic, so she does have problems with regulation. And I would feel really good as a parent. And when I'm talking to parents, I say, so tell me this. Why for the next 6 times could I not do that?
Yeah.
Because that's how hard it is. And I think it's deceptively simple and it's really hard. Because we're
Absolutely.
human.
Yeah.
We're
And
human
also it
beings.
builds up, doesn't it? For me with my child, it was 14, 15, when really there was 2 years and they were so tricky. And I'd hold it, and then there was and I'd just go in to the room and I'd go blah, 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 everything that I'd been holding on. And I'd feel great for a moment that I'd kind of let it all out. Get to the bottom of the stairs and think, oh no, I've got to repair it.
Yeah, that.
But you can't hold it in.
I think
Really
it's really
difficult.
important to remember that because to be to be paceful all the time would be
Yeah.
impossible. It's just
Yeah.
impossible.
And I think that if when you start, you have to be very intentional about it, don't
Yeah.
you? And slowly it seeps into your everyday. But there are still moments, still times where it's not possible. And actually, sometimes I think it's okay for us to have those moments because it demonstrates to our children, our young adults, that
Mm.
you can have these moments and then you can recover
You
from
can come
it,
back from
that
them.
you
Yeah.
don't have to be this very calm, consistent all the time. What's important is that we go back and we say, I'm really sorry. So when I've let it out,
Mm.
I go and have a cup of tea and in a moment, and then I go back and say, I'm really sorry. I was a bit stressed at the time or whatever. And that repair, just like the young person that you were talking about,
Right.
the example you were giving about the young person who's upset, that we model that.
Well,
We did it, we got it wrong, and now I'm going to say
absolutely.
sorry to you.
And it's recoverable. It's
Yeah,
recoverable. It's just harder when you've got bring the layer of trauma into it as well,
absolutely.
because the children have their own histories that get
Yeah,
activated just as we may be being activated as the parent, often from something from our own history. The children
yeah,
have these very complicated traumatic histories as well, which also get triggered. And then you do have, a challenge to
yeah,
how to support the children and to support yourselves in those moments. So when you
yeah,
put the layer of trauma in, it all becomes more complicated.
yeah.
Yeah.
And I guess when you're having those challenges at an intense level every day, so you're getting the aggression, the violence every day. As a parent, that is just wearing, isn't it? And
Totally.
nobody can be expected to be able to hold that peacefulness every day when you
Which
don't
is
know
what
what. Gone.
which is why we need the support for the parents long term.
Absolutely.
We can't go in with short interventions. We can't send them to a parenting group and expect that's going to make this okay, because what they actually need is someone sitting alongside them. When you're parenting these very challenging children with great challenges,
Yeah.
you need people in your life that can keep you going, that can
Yeah.
help you keep hold of your resilience. And that's what our services have really got to get to grips with. How do we support parents long term when they're parenting traumatized children?
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
doesn't mean we have to live in their homes. That doesn't mean we have to be in their lives all the time, but it means we need to be there there as a touch point for them.
Yeah. It's that accessibility, isn't it? That
Yeah.
they know that
Yeah.
they might be having a period where it's calm and they've all got it
Mm.
together, and then there's a moment of stress, whether that's Christmas, birthdays, transitions, whatever it is, that
Yeah.
they can come back and say, actually, it's really tricky now.
Exactly.
Um, can you be that person for me for the next
Yeah.
2 months or 3 months or whatever it is? Yeah.
And the fact that they keep needing that isn't a sign of failure. It's a sign of this is how challenging it is.
Yeah. And that's attachment and relationship, isn't it? It's
Totally.
all those kind of things. And we could go on about this, but I'm just mindful we're coming towards the end. But
Yeah.
then you've written loads of stuff. So
Mm.
just tell us a little bit about kind of because that, I guess, for parents, for professionals, for people, these are resources that when there is a gap, that
Mm.
might just be able to be a little bit helpful.
Yes, I think I'm just about to publish my 16th book. I'm not quite sure how that happened. So
Wow.
yes, there is a big back catalogue of my books. It's foundational within them are the two parenting programs, Nurturing Attachments, Foundations for Attachment, which have been developed as group work programs for parents, particularly parents of children with traumas. Then I was also privileged to work with Dan and Julie Hudson to do the Healing Relational Trauma book, which is like the DDP textbook. And then Dan and I wrote the workbook to go along with
Yeah.
that. So those are, if you're interested in really pursuing DDP in the parenting and across the whole model, including the therapy, those are kind of foundational books. I've written some parenting books. I've written for schools as well, for residential care. I've contributed, I should say, to colleagues who've done most of the writing for the residential care book. But yeah, there's a lot out there. I will mention I've got one book coming out this month in January, because we're talking in January,
Yeah.
which is, I've got it here because I never remember titles.
Do you want to show us on the
Yeah, I can show
screen?
it. You'll have to, I haven't got my booze on. Is that show? Have I got
Yeah,
the
the
right place?
DDP Guide to Healing Childhood Trauma, a visual and creative companion for parents and practitioners. That's really great.
So I've done something a little bit different in this book. I've tried to talk about DDP through stories, and my colleague
Right.
Juliet Young has brought images into it as well for me, because I'm not an artist, I'm a wordy person. So it's very short chapters, not too much text, but and a story for each chapter.
Yeah.
So
Wow.
yeah, I'm hoping that will be accessible, so and people who don't have a lot of time to read can dip
Yeah.
into it, read the odd story, and try look at a little bit of text to get the context for it. So that's coming out on the 21st of January.
Okay. Yeah, so I'll put a link to your website, and so all the resources all be on there. And when we put our newsletter out, I'll put a few little pictures
Yeah.
in to remind people of what we've
Yeah.
talked about. So these books really are for practitioners, some of that are going and doing DDP, and then there are some for that one's for parents maybe who have had some
I mean, that
um
one's for everybody, anybody who's
yeah,
interested in DDP, parents, practitioners across the
yeah,
board. But I've written books that are more aimed for parents, and I've written books that are more aimed for practitioners.
yeah. Because I think that's useful because often on the parenting courses that we do the 9-10 weeks, and we talk about pace, but you can't do it justice, you can't cover it.
Mm.
So those are really useful resources that then parents can go and find out more and add on to the very, I suppose, introductory idea of pace, which is always very helpful. So are you, go on.
Yeah, I've just said the best way of learning pace is experiencing it for yourself. So being with people who are paceful for you, that's the
Yeah,
way to embody it. So the books can help you put some context to that, some richness to what am I doing when I'm paceful. But
yeah.
you couldn't get it just from reading a book.
You
Need
need
to
to,
be with people who are paceful with you,
yeah,
which is why in our trainings we model the model all the way through.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And so people can come on so just tell me how if people wanted to be a DDP practitioner.
So
Um,
the route there is through the DDP training. So we have a level 1 and a level 2. So
yeah,
those are both 28 hours of training. That will give you the model, understanding the principles. You can start to bring that into your way of working. So the way you're already trained to work. So it
yeah,
doesn't make you a DDP therapist or a DDP
no,
practitioner. You're bringing DDP into your social work or your teaching or your therapy or whatever you're trained to do. If
yeah,
you want to develop as a DDP practitioner, then you're going on to what we call the practicum, which is supervised. You record your work and you're supervised by someone, and it's all on the DDP website, ddpnetwork.org. It will tell you the route and what that looks like.
And people can just work through that bit at their own pace.
Yes, exactly, with a supervisor. Yeah.
Yeah.
And the important thing is they're showing their work, so it's the quality of the work is guaranteed because we're supervising some. Whereas in the training, you're just listening and taking what you do from it. There's no evaluation part of it. There's no assessment of you. So that is it's an education. It's qualify you. It's not a qualification.
No, it just gives you, like you say, the model. And do you do other trainings, Kim, that people, if they wanted to come, and do you do workshops, trainings,
yes,
things like that?
The DDP website lists everything. There's special interest groups. We also have a list of DDP approved PACE trainers.
Yeah.
Who are being supervised by a DDP trainer. That's often a starting point for people. That might be 1 or 2. Well, 1 day is very introductory. 2 days gives you a reasonable grounding in PACE.
Yeah.
Some local authorities run the group work programs I've written, so they can be signed up to. That kind of depends where you live, whether that's being delivered or not. But I do a train the trainers, so I train people who want to facilitate those groups. Go back into local authorities to deliver it.
Yeah. And what are for parents? Are those accessible training for parents?
The PACE training is often geared towards parents.
Yeah.
That's the best one for a parent who's exclusively, I want to bring this into my parenting.
Yeah. That maybe they've had a little bit of knowledge or read about it, but they're like, actually, I want something a bit more. That would be it.
That and the group work programs, nurturing attachments and foundations of attachments, are for parents.
Excellent. Excellent. Thank you. So I could ask you a million more questions, but I'm aware that we're coming to the end of our time now. But so thank you so much for your time, and good luck with your new book. I shall definitely be buying it. It looks fab. So thanks very much for your time, Kim.